You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards-Nagel, and Taylor Polindo.
It is my pleasure to welcome Melissa Beck to our podcast today. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
We are
so excited.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you, and we're excited to learn about generosity, something maybe we need to do more of.
You can never have enough.
Melissa comes to us from her company, Anonymous, which is a company that specializes in generosity, and we're going to learn more about that. And she serves as the president of Anonymous and is here to help us understand the topic. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I guess we should start with, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what you do.
President of Anonymous. We're a consulting firm, and we have the pleasure of working with really large family foundations and families on their philanthropic strategies. And they are giving away multiple millions, maybe tens of millions even a year. And we really help them focus in on exactly what it is they want to accomplish with those funds. They're so fortunate that they have quite a bit of money that they've set aside for the betterment of society to help others. And we want them to use every single one of those dollars to the best of its ability. Just like you would if you were a multimillionaire or a billionaire, you would most likely hire someone to manage your money. We feel that you also need expertise in the giving it away. I think it was Rockefeller that said it's so much harder, to paraphrase, so much harder to give away money well than it even is to make it. And so that's what we do.
Okay. So what's the hard part about giving away money then?
I think initially it's really figuring out what it is you want to accomplish. We find that so many people are giving money away and they're doing a lot of good, but they haven't really taken the time to sit down and say, in a perfect world, if I could alleviate one thing or I could accomplish just one thing, what would that be? And so they end up giving to a bucket of things instead of really focusing in. And when you have considerable wealth to give away, it's really important that you decide what it is you want to accomplish because you actually have the ability to truly move the needle. And so for us, a lot of the hardest part is figuring out exactly what that is, that it's not just, I want to serve kids. Well, what about kids is it that you truly care about? Or the environment? That's another big topic. The environment is obviously crucial, so incredibly important, so worthy of your funding. But is it soil preservation? Is it ozone? Is it the oceans? Is it species preservation? What is it about the environment that's really important to you? And then let's focus in and find something that you're truly passionate about and move the needle on that. And so that's what we do. We also have clients where there's something that happened in their life and now philanthropy is a priority or maybe something that they're getting involved in that they didn't have the opportunity to in the past. And not everyone even knows the initial bucket. Some people will say, I care about the environment or I care about kids. And then we have to drill down and find out what that is. But we also have clients that are like, I'm not entirely certain what it is that I want to give to. And then it's just really getting to know themselves. What we do in our process is really highly personal. And we want to know your bucket list. We want to know your wildest and craziest dreams, that you dream of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro one day. We want to know all of those things so that we can fold them into their philanthropy. And inspiration and generosity can come from anywhere. It doesn't need to come from a life experience or something that is tangible to you. We have a client who does incredible work around philanthropy. And what we initially came to him with was all topics surrounding the economy, which isn't necessarily a story we all hear about, but he's an economist at heart. And that gets him so excited. And there are so many things that we can do related to the economy that helps others. So it's okay if that's a motivation and not necessarily always this like super heart-wrenching, my child dealt with this, or I have a friend or neighbor or a relative that dealt with this. It can really just come from a passion area.
So in getting ready to talk with you, I learned a little bit. You could steer me in the right direction, but it sounds like what you're talking about with Anonymous and what you do are these two words I learned that connect with generosity I never thought about before, which are impact and fulfillment. And I was
Yes.
really enjoying learning about that. Could you share a little bit more about those two words and how that propels generosity in what you do?
Yeah, I think specifically with philanthropy and generosity, for so many, they quantify it by how much money they're giving away. I gave away $1 million last year, or I gave $200,000 to this organization. And we just feel that number is flawed. You may give $200,000 to an organization, but I gave $10,000 over here and created a bigger impact. And so we're always trying to drive, what change did you make? What impact did you cause per dollar that you spent? And let's look at it that way. How can we leverage our clients' funds? If it's $1 million, that it's the value of 10. We also approach everything as though we had $0. You'll find a way to spend $1 million. We challenge our team with, if these are the goals that our clients trying to accomplish, how would you do it if you had no money whatsoever? Who would you partner with? Who would you talk to? What would you leverage? Are there companies you could leverage? Are there associations you could leverage? How could we work through others to get this work done? And so we're so focused on the impact that we're creating. And because these strategies are so personal to our clients, they're so bought in on what it is we're doing, how we're going to do it, what the steps are. What we find is that it leads to greater fulfillment. Traditional philanthropy, which is, I'm going to write you a check. You, charity, are going to go do this work, and you're going to come back to me and tell me what you did. We don't find that overly fulfilling. And especially with a younger and younger generation, they want to roll up their sleeves. They want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to just sit in a boardroom and write checks. With these very personal, strategic plans that we put together for philanthropy, which leverage the incredible work being done by charitable organizations, but isn't solely done through charitable organizations. We may do giant awareness and marketing campaigns. We may build technology. We may start businesses.
It sounds longer lasting.
It makes you feel good all of the time. And I think that something about generosity is you should do it with pure intentions, but it can impact you just as much as the impact you're making. And we want that to be, because that's the only thing that's going to beget more philanthropy. In my opinion, too small of a percentage of wealth is going towards changing the lives of others. And I think the only way to make that percentage greater, and it's been stagnant for generations, is for it to just be more fun and fulfilling and joyous. Glee that you get when you do accomplish something, you need to be having that all the time. And that's what our clients feel, is that they constantly know on an everyday, every month basis what they're doing to advance the cause that they care about, not just once a year in a report.
So are you saying being more generous can give you more joy in your life?
It should be the most joyous thing you've ever done, is being generous. And I truly think that it has the ability to be that, even more than building a business or anything that our clients have gone through to create the wealth that they're now giving away. Giving it away should be the most fun, the most fulfilling that they've ever done.
Would you say that the opposite of generosity is selfishness, or?
I think the opposite of generosity is probably greed, because, being generous is about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, caring about their welfare, maybe even more than your own. And greed is the complete disregard for others, and everything is self-motivated. I think you can be generous and selfish at the same time. For example, I have 2 sons that play water polo, and I am also on the foundation board at UC Irvine. And I was able to bring the coaching staff of UC Irvine to do a clinic for my son's high school team. Is that a little bit selfish? Yeah, my son benefits from that coaching and that mentorship and that clinic. But it's also generous because I'm giving this to the 50 kids on this team. They're all able to hear what it's like to be a Division I athlete, to get coaching from the highest level coaching in the country. In that instance, I'm both. I'm selfish because this is awesome for my kid, but it's also generous because I don't have to necessarily leverage this relationship that I have for the benefit of all of these kids.
Sure.
So then what I'm hearing you say is then if there's a selfish payoff, that doesn't invalidate the generosity.
Not at all. And even we personally at Anonymous, we don't work with corporations, but I do think that any corporation, whatever they do to be generous, should tie back to their mission. And it was funny because we were actually talking about this earlier today among the team. And I think an amazing example of it is the Helpful Honda people. So Honda is a car manufacturer. And I actually think that the Helpful Honda people might only be a Southern California Honda thing.
Okay.
I think what happened was a group of Honda dealership owners in Southern California got together and they decided to do acts of kindness for people in Southern California and brand it as the Helpful Honda people. And so they will do things like pay for a new tire for a mom who is having trouble getting to work because she ran over a nail. Or I was actually at, my third son plays basketball, and club basketball is silly expensive. And you go to these tournaments and you have to pay to park. So it's $15 to park. And then it's $15 to get in to watch your kid play in a tournament that you've already paid money for them to play.
Wow.
So two parents want to drive together to go to watch their child play basketball. That's like a $45 endeavor. So we actually went to a tournament and the Helpful Honda people were there. And if you were driving a Honda, they paid for your parking and admission into the basketball tournament.
Nice.
Awesome. Unfortunately, we were not in a Honda, but it was so cool. And it was like, I got to see like Helpful Honda in the wild. Like it was, so they'll pay for someone's groceries or they'll buy someone a bus pass. And so they do these things and they make commercials about it. And I think most people in Southern California, if you ask who the Helpful Honda people are, they would know. And that is something that is generosity. What they are doing is benefiting someone who needs it. However, it is also benefiting their brand. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. For a company, you should be doing things that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can be selfish and generous at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, even
Interesting.
chasing that like high or that joy.
No, absolutely. Prior to being president of Anonymous, I was CEO for Big Brothers Big Sisters in Orange County. And I would always hear from the people who mentored in our program that they feel like they were getting more out of it than they were giving. And of course, that's ridiculous. The child was benefiting so much from their mentorship. But any program should be like that. The mentors should be getting that satisfaction out of it, because if they're not, then there's not going to be longevity there. You have to be giving that feeling to people. And we want that feeling for the people who are giving money just as much as the people who are participating in the program.
It's like the endorphins you were talking about earlier. It's like the fuel for the fire to continue your generous acts, whatever they may be, big or small.
And I mean, tens of trillions of dollars are about to pass from one generation to the next. And if we want a significant amount of that to go towards philanthropy, it can't just all be self-sacrifice or selfless. It has to involve a level of fulfillment, which is what we have determined to call it in our company.
So in talking to you, it sounds like this generational shift has occurred not just in the finances, but in how generosity plays out. So I heard you say it's not really about having your name on a building and it's not a boardroom check, but the model's completely different.
People really want to be involved. We have a client who is focused on species preservation. A lot of people understand the honeybee and how critical bees are to life on Earth. And
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what the stat is, but it's something like if all of the bees died, everything would die in 9 days or something like that.
Oh,
And so the bees are super critical. But so she challenged us, what are the animals or the species that people don't realize yet are so critical? We scoured the globe. We talked with experts all over in pretty much every single country, every continent about what animals are next in species preservation. She doesn't want to just write the check. She wants to go see them.
Oh,
She wants to know exactly how that is going to impact the village and the inhabitants of the area in which she's giving money. One of the projects we're working on is in the Philippines. It's the area where there's the largest trade of shark fins, where I guess people are cutting off shark fins and selling them. It's a big business. I don't understand. I think it's people eat them. This village is where the majority of these shark fins come from. And we are working with the village to have those same fishermen go from killing a shark by cutting off its fin to now being ecotourism guides and bringing tourists to see the sharks, which is more lucrative. You're depleting there's no longevity play there. Eventually, there's not going to be any sharks for you to cut the fins off of. But if you are now, as a community, going to rally around these sharks and have your livelihood come from the preservation of them, that changes everything. And so it's not just the act of going from killing these sharks to these sharks surviving, but it's also now, how does this change the entire community? People are asking those second and third level questions of what are the secondary and tertiary benefits of what it is that I'm doing? And we're working
There's the
on
impact
a
right there with that one.
Yeah. And they want to go, they want to see it. They want to know, they want to talk with the people who live there. They want to get to know the families who have been involved in this and know that also they're stopping a trade that's really horrific. That's what people want. They don't want to just write a check or put their name on a building. They want to know exactly what's going to happen after.
It really solves the problem. Legitimately solves the problem because it gives economics, right?
And that's what we say. This isn't just charity, it's change. We want to solve it. And for our clients, they have the good fortune and they're so blessed that they can actually move the needle to solve something. But it's going to take focus and strategy and ingenuity to do it, not just a kind of a transactional relationship. You have to ask the good questions and you have to get really involved. It needs to be proactive.
So for the general person that's listening, it sounds like we're starting with a style of generosity that's begins monetarily, but it almost seems like the effect, the impact, right, to use Anonymous's term, really goes non-monetary in a much larger, lasting scale. What kind of lights or sparks your fire in this work with the non-monetary side?
Just impacting other people's lives. And it's something that can start small. I try on a day-to-day basis to have a positive impact on the people in my sphere. One of my sons is in high school, and we have this really amazing mom group. We call ourselves the Mothership. All of us have kids that do different activities, play different sports. There's girls, there's boys, but we have adopted one another in this tribe. And we all are incredibly generous with one another. There was a water polo game that I couldn't attend. I was traveling for work, and the whole Mothership showed up in my set. Cheered louder than I ever would. I'm kind of a quiet spectator. But I know my son felt supported in that, even though I wasn't there. And they actually have an exchange student. It was her senior night. And again, we show up for her senior night. We show up for people's plays. We show up for things, and we show up for one another. We're constantly checking in on each other with, how are you doing? Being a mom of a high schooler is so hard. Being a high schooler is so hard these days. And so being a parent of one, it's such a struggle of not being the micromanager parent, but not letting them sacrifice their future and wanting them to succeed, but also wanting them to learn for themselves. And the struggle is real. And so we're constantly checking in on one another. Hey, how are you doing? Is there anything that I can be doing for you? And so that is where I feel like generosity stems from, is starting with your own circle, whether it's your family or your friends or your colleagues, and just always starting with like, how can I help? What do you need? And that selflessness of putting others before yourself. Obviously, our clients are the 1% of the 1%. But for any of us, that we can have that generosity of spirit in everything that we do. And that is what truly is going to make the world a better place.
Well said.
You have to actually really see it.
I think you have to constantly be putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think some places where maybe people go wrong in philanthropy is they think about solving a problem and they think about how they would solve it if it was happening to them, when you really have to put yourself in someone else's situation and in someone else's shoes and really listen to things from their perspective. There are causes that our clients care about that I hadn't really thought about before or don't have direct experience with. And so if I bring my lived experience to that, I would probably be doing a disservice because I've never walked in their shoes. And so I think sometimes that's also the really hard part, is not trying to just solve it with the tools you have in your chest from your life experience, but really trying to understand the circumstance that either this individual is in, or these people are in, or this animal, or whatever the circumstances be.
I love that this generosity conversation is surrounded by so much relationship for you too, which is part of what we talk about here. So I'm curious if you could share a story where open communication and communication in general impacted success in your work.
I think a big part of communication that maybe is under practiced is actually the listening part. And sometimes we're so quick to want to be an active listener that we're listening to respond and not listening to necessarily understand. And for us, listening without agenda is a big part of communication for us, and not putting any sort of motive or agenda first. Because our clients have essentially empowered us and trusted us to solve problems that they care about. For us to truly solve them, we have to be a better listener than anyone we know. But then we also have to communicate with our client. And that's what makes us successful, is our clients need to know exactly what we're doing on their behalf at all times. So we probably over communicate, but that's part of what brings that fulfillment, is they know what is going on. One of our clients, they want to stop childhood drowning. Number one cause of death of kids 1 to 4. A lot of people don't realize that. Also the number one cause of death of kids with autism. And drowning is preventable. And that is something that a client has tasked us with. How do we prevent kids from drowning? And so we've done all the research. We know how kids drown when they're 0 and 1 and 2 versus 13 and 14. What are the demographics? All of those things. And then we come up with, let's call it like 6 strategies for the year. These are the buckets we're going to pursue to solve this problem. Under each strategy, there could be 5 to 10 tactics that we're going to take this year. Our client constantly knows where we're at with all of these, which is part of what brings that fulfillment, is they feel empowered. They feel in the know. This wasn't that they gave money for someone else to then go do something. They really feel a true part of it. And that comes from communication. And it also means listening if we propose something that doesn't resonate with them. We have had ideas that I personally loved that our client just didn't love as much as I did. One of us was not right and one of us was not wrong. There's so many different ways you can approach something. And we have to listen to that too, because if we don't, then our client isn't going to feel as fulfilled as if they're 1,000% excited about each one of the strategies that we're doing. So I think on both sides, we need to communicate so much more, and we need to be super transparent and lay it all out, not assume anything. But then also in the work that we're doing, we have to be really focused listeners and really go in without agenda or without trying to prove how smart we are or how great of a company we are. Put ourselves in someone else's shoes and try and meet people where they are and live that experience as much as we can.
When you talk about childhood drowning, it seems like such a big thing to try to solve. I would think it would be challenging not to think negatively. When you hear this from a client to say, wow, we're going to wipe out world hunger. It's like, some of these are big. Yeah. So it's like, how do you handle that?
That's where you have to try and drill down more and more. Let's take something like world hunger. Is it that we want to focus on food deserts and giving fresh fruits and vegetables to people who don't have access to that? Or do we want to focus on kind of those basic needs in countries where it's supplying flour and water and basics for survival? Is it helping plant regenerative gardens so that communities can continue to grow and thrive? So we try and drill down as much as we possibly can. With drowning prevention, I think one of the reasons that we haven't solved this yet is no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to think about a kid drowning. It's horrific. And because of that, there's a lot of misconceptions around it. People think it's a parent's fault or because of negligence. And the data will show you that is 100% absolutely not the case. While it's preventable, it isn't because someone dropped the ball. That's just not true. And so how do we go about solving this? And we looked at this and said, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to look at this? How are people not looking at it that they should? And so an obvious path was the American Academy of Pediatrics. I didn't completely remember my pediatrician ever telling me about drowning. I remember vividly hearing about SIDS. I feel like it was the era of SIDS when I had my kids. I don't recall, not saying she didn't tell me, but I don't recall it. So how do we work with pediatricians to make sure that no parent ever says, I just didn't know? Because we talked with hundreds of parents and all of them said, I just didn't. And that's another of not coming with an agenda, just coming and listening and trying to understand where these parents and these families are coming from. So that was one route. Another route we thought of was pool and spas, especially here in Southern California. And a lot of kids between 0 and 4 that do drown in backyard pools. And so what do we need to be doing with that industry? And when we first approached this pool and spa industry, they didn't love us. We weren't friends. But we literally showed up at the National Pool and Spa Expo with the biggest booth they would sell us. But they've become an incredible partner and they've seen how they can be a champion in this and how they can show their families that they care about them and they care about their kids by educating them about pool safety. If you are not talking to your clients about pool and spa safety when you're talking to them about building them a new pool, then you're not part of the solution. There were some swim devices that we didn't think were marketed well and that they said that they were teaching your child how to swim or almost that you could ignore your kid in the pool and they can have fun because they have these flotation devices on. A lot of the parents that we spoke with had strong feelings that these flotation devices were adding to the number of kids that were drowning every year because they created a false sense of security. Kids felt like they were safe or they could swim in the water and they really did not know how. And so we worked with a national retailer to change the way they were marketing those online, to take out the bullets that were misleading. We weren't trying to say you can't sell these or these shouldn't be manufactured. We were just saying you need to make sure that how they're being described is responsible. And so that was another tactic that we took. But working with our clients, we just launched actually this week a national campaign with athletes across the country that the first sport they're going to teach is their child is how to swim. So you may be an NFL player or you may be an Olympic gymnast, but the first sport you're going to teach your child is not football and not gymnastics and not soccer. It's going to be swimming. And we are doing these things at all times, and our clients constantly know what we're doing. And that's communication.
Yeah. But it's also open-mindedness. It's also, I think, listening for themes, including themes that you might not like.
And themes that they may be really hard to solve. And it's probably not the smartest idea to try and go down a crusade of not having flotation devices sold anymore. Let's see what we can accomplish.
Right.
We can accomplish them being marketed differently. We can accomplish an awareness campaign of parents knowing that flotation devices can give your child a false sense of security in the water, and that they do know that often kids will drown not during swim times, but at 8:00 at night while parents are cleaning up dinner and they were maybe outside earlier that day and they go back out. How can we think of things outside the box? How can we make foes our partners? And what's that missing glue? And how can we be that glue? And a lot of the things that we were doing in that partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics on how can they have tools to give their parents about drowning prevention actually doesn't have to cost very much. Going to the Pool and Spa Expo maybe cost us 10 grand for the booth. And then obviously we made a cool booth, but that partnership is worth tens of millions of dollars of all of the families that they're speaking to now about pool safety. And so that's how we try and approach everything. It's not about how much money you spent. It's about what impact you're making.
I'm hearing an element of bravery too. And the part of what I'm hearing is if you really want to make an impact, like you're talking about, Melissa, I have to actually come face to face with the problems. I cannot imagine how heartbreaking it is to talk to 200 parents who lost their children to drowning, but it would be a necessary thing to understand what's happening.
Yeah. And Suzanne, who actually runs that project on our team, she used to run these, I think it was called like Warrior Wednesdays. They were virtual and it was coffee or wine or whatever. And it was just open to any parent that wanted to come and give advice. What did they think we needed to be doing? What did they feel was missing? And she hosted these every week for like 2 years.
Wow.
And because it's a small and unfortunately growing community of parents who have lost a child or now have a child who has a permanent disability because of drowning. And so we want to give them a voice. And we know that they have an experience. And there are themes that we saw from those, the flotation devices, which research wasn't going to show us. There's no hard data that is going to tell you that anything that they create a false, there's nothing to show that. But we heard it time and time again from parents. And it took 6 months for me to even know she was doing these because she was doing them from like 8 to 9 o'clock at night. So it was after kids went to bed, after dinner. And it was just, you could come and you could talk. And it was incredible. But you have to face those head on. And these are really tough issues. But if you're not going to look them in the face, you're definitely not going to solve them.
So that kind of really changes what we've traditionally done out of generosity. Because if you read a check in a boardroom and never really faced the problem, this is radically different.
Yeah. But this truly is what we're finding. This generation that's, let's say, 35 and under, it's what they want to be doing. They want to understand. They want to be a part of it. If we want philanthropy to grow, this is the type of philanthropy it needs to be. It's not your grandpa's philanthropy.
Sounds like
that.
empathy plays a big role then for those.
I think so. And I think potentially that is the shift, is to a much more empathic path through philanthropy, truly seeking to understand and meet people where they are. It's not arm's length. And while it's tough, it does bring so much more fulfillment. And when you do see change, that much more joy. We want people to feel like, wow, I did that. I was a part, and more so than just like I helped fund it.
My husband used to work in the wealth management
Okay.
industry, and I've just been hearing recession for a while now. I'm wondering how you plan for the economy, how that affects people's willingness to give. I guess you're not really working with people who don't have a lot to give, but do you notice big changes around maybe 4 years ago when things changed?
We are fortunate that I'm not going to say our clients are recession proof.
Right.
But when you have a family foundation or a donor advised fund, which is another vehicle that people use to do their philanthropy, you've already given the money away. So when you've put money into a donor advised fund or you put money into a private foundation, it's not really yours anymore. It has to be used for philanthropy. And so obviously the market can impact the returns that money is making. But fortunately for us, it's not a choice of, do I use this money for philanthropy or do I buy a new car? They can't buy the new car with the money.
Yeah.
I will say that over the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had never been in something like this before. Our clients gave more over those 3 years than they had budgeted, than they planned for. They kept all of the programs that they were already doing. Let's say their passion project was kids who have experienced trauma or the environment or music education or drowning prevention. They were still doubling down on those initiatives and still advancing those projects while also saying, how can I help over here? And so they were doing more with the food bank, or they were doing more with the homeless over COVID, was a forgotten population. They didn't have the ability to shelter in place. Shelters are group facilities. So we had clients that really got involved there. I would say that their generosity over that time completely blew me away. And some of them have continued with those projects since. So yes, I am not a financial expert, and I do not know if a recession is coming and how severe it will be. But I think that even if there are times where monetarily we maybe cannot give, there are so many other ways that we can show generosity.
Do you feel like then when there's a greater need, people are more willing to?
I think people know their good fortune in whatever level that may be. And that may be that I have food in the fridge and I paid rent this month and my kids are safe sleeping in bed. And when times are tough, I think it's a reminder to all of us that those are the luxuries that we can't take for granted. And when we have that gratitude for what we have, I think that it naturally then leads to how can we be generous to somebody else, because tonight I'm good.
So in thinking about your tribe and the work that you do you have any advice for people that are looking to integrate more philanthropic principles into their lives with their friends, their communities, families, coworkers? This all sounds fascinating. How do I apply more of this generosity or ideology into my life?
Yeah, I think philanthropy is such a great family activity or even friends activity. And to think about what is easy for you. Philanthropy shouldn't be necessarily this hardship. You can do things that are not a chore. Figure out what those are and then do more of them. My son volunteers locally, it's a place called the Shea Center. They do equine therapy for kids with disabilities. He loves kids and he loves horses. So those two things make sense. We just actually we have a neighbor who's on the board of an organization called Urban Surf for Kids. I had never heard of them. They're pretty small. But we went to their dinner the other night and they do surfing for kids who have experienced severe trauma or are in foster care. My son is a huge surfer. He surfs probably 4 or 5 days a week. I was like, he can do this and it would be fun for him. Do you love hiking with your family? And you can take dogs from a shelter on hikes? Are you a family that loves animals and you can do something with a marine mammal center or with a shelter? Trying to think about what is it that you already like to do. I guarantee you that there is a way to do that to benefit others.
You're so creative. I love all
No,
Yeah.
thought process.
creative problem solving.
I keep thinking that maybe one of the takeaways from this episode is learning about generosity generally, but asking ourselves, where do we stand on that journey? And like you just said, asking yourself, what are things that aren't a chore? And maybe asking yourself, oh, is it you'd like children as a philanthropy, but maybe asking the next 20 questions around that topic and saying, what is it that bothers me the most about that area? What is it that I love the most? And I think the introspection piece is really big as a takeaway for me, because I find the more I listen to you talk, the more I think, I don't think I have a strategy. And I think it's because I haven't asked the questions.
Yeah. I want to double down that there should be things that you already like doing and don't stray from that. Otherwise, you won't stick with it. I was having a conversation with my mom last year. She's single. She isn't the most social person in the world, but I was like, Mom, you need to be getting out of the house more. You need to do some things. My mom loves gardening. She's always loved gardening. We have an ecology center by our house, and there's a group of seniors that get together every Wednesday morning and they garden at the ecology center. Mom, go garden with these seniors. And at first she was like, oh, I don't know, new people. But it has to be something that you already enjoy doing. And now it's a huge part of her week. And she's, I can't. I have the ecology center on Wednesdays. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry. You have to find something that you already love. And then like with her, who, again, I love my mom dearly, not the most social person. But I was like, you have one thing already in common with all of these people. You all like gardening. So you can just start there. And it's grown and it's been really great for her. But I would also say, I feel like finding an organization or a way that you can leverage what it is you love doing to benefit others is like a second step. The first step really is just showing up for the people who surround you.
So philanthropy is not for the 1% alone.
No, and it doesn't have to involve money. Our most precious resource is our time in it. That means so much more to someone, whether you know them or whether you don't, that you took the time to think of them, then, hey, here's $100.
Yeah.
I like hearing
anything
all your
else?
stories.
Melissa, are there any books or resources around this topic of generosity and giving? And I just feel like changing the world is really what you've taught us. How to change
I love
the
this
world.
question because I'm an avid reader. I'm always reading 2 books at any given time. One is a fiction book that I read with, again, the mothership. We all read a fiction book once a month. And so and I probably read 2 a month, but so I'm constantly reading a fiction book. And then I'm constantly reading a book that is applicable to my professional life. So whether that's about philanthropy or about leadership, which is my love language. I love books on leadership and on developing others, which I think is probably where some of my generosity comes from. As president of Anonymous, I think my biggest responsibility is making sure that everyone here is growing and developing and feels as though they're fulfilled in what it is that they're doing. And so that's how I show up with generosity at work. I have 4 books that I love that are on the professional side. The first one's a little wonky. It's called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's a slow read. Like it's got a lot of data in it. Love it, but it's really good. It talks about measurement, and that's something that is still an area of development within philanthropy. You can't apples to apples compare any organization. Their missions are different. The way they go about their work is different. I also am a firm believer that looking at how much an organization spends on salaries and overhead is not what you should be looking at. And you really should measure what matters. And that is the impact that they're creating. So that's a great book. On the fulfillment side, I really love The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath. We really try and create those moments for our clients. My personal mission is that when A client of ours is 100 years old and in a rocking chair on their porch, and they're thinking back on their life of what they did and those moments that are sticking with them. I want those to be moments that we helped create. And that came from generosity and philanthropy. And so I love that book. I love a book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. It's about seizing the day. It challenges us in this book of who are the people that you want to create these moments with. Do them now. You're always like, oh, when my kids are older or when I'm retired. When you're retired is probably not when your kids want to hang out with you. They want to hang out with you now.
Yeah.
So do the trip, make the memories now. And so I love that. And then my favorite book that I've read in the last couple years, not necessarily related to philanthropy, but I think applicable to everyone, is called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. It's about the hospitality industry, and it's about him in this restaurant, 11 Madison Park in New York, and their quest to become the best restaurant in the world. At some point when everyone is 3 Michelin star, the food's amazing. So what's going to be your differentiator? And they decided it was going to be hospitality and the way they make people feel. And again, that's what we hope to do, is make people feel a certain way. And I got so much from this book that was seemingly not at all about my industry. I have recommended it to people more in the last couple of years than any other book. So those are my top 4.
Awesome.
Love it.
Thank
Those are great
you.
reads. Okay, so I want to ask you, one of my favorite questions. And you can think about this personally or professionally. In terms of generosity, what is something that you're most proud of today?
I think I have to say my family and my kids. So I have 3 boys and a husband, and I am most proud that they are good people. I think they put others first. I see them put one another first every day. They give back. They volunteer willingly. But I think mostly they're kind to others. They're kind to their friends. I think the same principle that I talked about with the mothership, we show up for one another. We ask, how can I help? They do the same, their circles. And I'm really proud of that. I think that they are good human beings. And yeah, without a doubt, that's my proudest accomplishment. And I think anyone that knows me would know that my answer would 100% be about my kids. I'm a professional and I love that I'm a working mom. I think it's a wonderful example, especially for young boys, to see a mom in a C-level position. And I feel very fortunate that I've been in a C-level position most of their lives, but they all know that I'm a mom first.
Well done, then.
I feel like we could do a whole episode on motherhood and working and
great. Invite me back for that one.
Yeah, just reading about you.
She wants to come back.
I think that would be such a great
I
time.
know. The queen of the mothership.
The mothership. It's a great group.
Before we let you go, Melissa, I just simply want to thank you for being with us today. We have learned so much about generosity. And what I really love about our conversation is how creative and updated the view of generosity is. It's time for me to get thinking about what I'm doing. So I'm really excited and motivated.
Yeah.
Thank you for teaching us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Say hi to the mothership for us.
Great.
My son calls them the Montourage. We call it the mothership.
The mom
Thank
tourage.
you so much for everything, the creativity, the ways of thinking about. I immediately wrote down, think of something near me that interests me. Why have I never thought about that? Focus on something that already brings you joy, even the examples with your kids. It's great. I'm totally going to think about that. So thank you so much.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.